Good afternoon. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email Marketing. My guest today, Mike Donnelly, CEO, and I bet you love saying this, of The Seventh Sense. What a great company name.
Matthew, great to be here. Appreciate you reaching out.
No, I was intrigued by the company, and of course, I want to ask the history of the name right out of the gate.
So there, funny, well, not a funny story, but you always make mistakes when you're a first time founder. And we had initially named the company. In fact, it is still our incorporation name, which tends to be kind of a pain with regards to contracts, legal, et cetera. But our name was Telepath Data. And the reason for that was we were thinking of telepathy, and then data. But then there was numerous people that said, "Hey, this sounds like a phone company or something similar."
Right.
And somebody said, "Hey, 7 cents," and we were like, "Wow, we can actually get the domain name, and it's not very expensive." So we went after that, and here we are, multiple years later.
And am I fair in saying that, like the critical thing that you do for customers, and I know realize a broad domain of customers, is make their email better. Send time optimization being a fundamental piece of that.
Yeah, so we really the company has a bit of a long story or history and pivots and things like that. But
Sure.
today, in today's world, we like to call it really delivery time optimization, because
Okay.
send time optimization is, people get confused where it's, well, I have to send to each individual. No, you press send once and it gets delivered to each individual.
I see.
So delivery time optimization is where we got started in the world of marketing and artificial intelligence. But we've now really focused on that as our core value, but we've continued to innovate in different areas around what we just like to call email delivery optimization.
Email delivery optimization. Got it. Like it. And then there's some platform focus to the company as well. From what I could tell, you work a lot in the HubSpot and Marketo platforms, correct?
That is correct. So solely in those two markets, we actually have one very, very large multi-billion-dollar organization that uses us in all kinds of different facets, but they were where we kind of piloted the product dating back to 2013, when it was really just an idea, and they still use us today for all kinds of different things.
Nice.
But yeah, HubSpot and Marketo are two primary marketplaces. That's where we wake up, think about day in and day out.
It's been something watching HubSpot in particular just grow
Yep.
over the last X number of years. They weren't founded that much before you guys.
2000, I want to say 2007 or 2008. I mean, they've been around for quite some time, but they've really, over the past few years, they've exploded. And
Oh, geez.
in fact, we were one of their first, what they called back then, connect partners, when they were thinking about becoming a platform. And there's history behind that as well.
I talked with them somewhere early on. Another company under our same umbrella, heavily involved in video and built on top of Wistia's platform. And Wistia, up in Boston,
Yep.
they were kind of corporate buddies with HubSpot, and so I twigged to HubSpot relatively early on. Like, this is quite cool, and then just watching the expansion has been unbelievable.
Yep.
Unbelievable. And people don't always think of HubSpot in terms of email marketing, but can you talk a bit to that? Because it is a robust platform for that.
Yeah. So I think that's, I mean, they really had a, if you think about where HubSpot started, it was more or less it was in kind of like the inbound marketing space. What does that mean? They were essentially telling people, put blogs up on your website, and then how am I going to reach those people? In fact, Pete Caputa, who I've become very, very good friends with, he started the partner program at HubSpot. I think he was employee number 20.
Wow.
And he went to the executives, Brian and Dharmesh, and said, "Hey, we need to do email marketing." And they all just laughed at him and said, there's hundreds of systems out there that do email marketing. And eventually they said, okay, well, we'll get into email marketing. And they got into it very, very early on in their history, because it's like, hey, I'm collecting all of these leads. Now what do I do with them?
Yeah.
And so they, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but they're were very heavily invested in kind of the marketing automation space. And as part of that, they built a really strong CRM.
Yep.
And obviously now they're branching out to kind of become the true back office for growing companies. I mean, you even see with their latest products around payments, where they'll host your payment system for you, your subscription management
Wow,
system.
I didn't know they'd done that.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. Okay, so we don't want to talk about HubSpot the whole time, but no, it's good to get a grasp of where these things come from, because when a company gets well known enough, it looked like they just showed up, and there's always evolution, there's always decisions. Some of them, like you like your founding company name, like oops, we hadn't done, wish we hadn't done that, and others,
Right.
you look brilliant in the rearview mirror and stuff like that. Yeah. So back to 7sense, and let's talk HubSpot and Marketo. Who are your customers and where do they find you?
So we're very heavily invested in marketing in their HubSpot, like the HubSpot ecosystem, the Marketo ecosystem. We work with a number of HubSpot agencies. That's where we primarily focus on kind of like an inbound methodology where customers find us either via, word of mouth. We don't do any paid advertising, anything along those lines. It's all just, referral based, or people finding us through the HubSpot app marketplace. We've also invested in SEO so that customers can find us that way as well.
Right.
They might be looking to solve, how do I throttle emails with HubSpot? And then they find us. How do I throttle emails with Marketo? And then they find us.
Okay.
And then we go through a process with them to learn a little bit more about what they're trying to accomplish, and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned early HubSpot becoming a platform, and then you mentioned the app marketplace, and I sort of join those two things together for someone who may not be familiar with a platform. Like, if you're running HubSpot for fill in the blank piece of your business, somewhat like your iPhone, at the risk of a poor comparison, there's an app store, and there's some amazing stuff in the app store to expand what you can do with that tool set.
Yeah, it can't be all things to all people, and there's specialist apps that are out there. Like, hey, I need
Like yours.
a general contractor is another way to look at it. Hey, I need
Yeah.
a plumber. Let me go get the plumber. I need an electrician. Let me go get the electrician. So
Like
look at it that way as well.
when Apple launched the iPhone and Steve Jobs was in the no, we'll write all the apps anyone will ever need, because version 1 it was only web apps, I think they called them, and relenting on that and shipping a proper software development kit. Like, how many billions of dollars in the app store business for Apple now? Like,
Yeah,
when
it's
you can unleash the ingenuity
right.
of other people, you grow.
Yep.
Not an easy play to make, but
No, not at all.
not at all.
And again, we've been at it. We've seen it from the beginning of when HubSpot started making the shift, and
Yeah.
I mean, it was really them moving an aircraft carrier is what it
Was it really?
what it equated to, and it still is that way.
Big company, fast moving, lots of customers. Yep. Yeah. Everything scale catches up with you, right? It becomes harder to do stuff, and that's another benefit of an app ecosystem. If you can make that platform transition, that innovation is no longer only your job.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, Marketo, I am not as familiar hands-on with Marketo as a lot of other platforms, especially since they become part of Adobe. But how long you guys worked on that platform, and what are your observations about it?
So I will tread lightly on this. They are in a completely different space than HubSpot. They have not developed, they don't invest heavily in kind of their platform infrastructure.
Okay.
And so it has been, well, we have very, very large customers in the Marketo space, and it is quite challenging to engineer products around their
You can't see his feet moving, but he's dancing.
right around their code, I guess is one way to put it. But no, it's a very, Marketo has obviously been around for a long time. They've got a very strong system. It's kind of like, what I like to look at is, it's a little bit kind of like an old school Salesforce. it's a very, it's there. It's a very strong system,
Yeah.
but not a
Yeah.
lot of innovation happening within the platform or the
Well, correct me if
ecosystem.
I'm wrong, but their customer base skews huge, and that's about it. It's not a small business. HubSpot, you've really got some range, and they provide an entry point for all sorts of sizes, and then eventually you can't leave. But
Right.
right, Marketo seems to be big iron, big budget, big list, big campaigns. Man, and that makes sense as part of Adobe. I mean, Adobe's got their own kind of wild ecosystem, and I still don't always understand where the enterprise tools like Marketo fit into that. But now you mentioned Salesforce. Was that ever a platform you contemplated moving your technology to? In addition,
Yeah, and I mean it is something that we contemplate at least once a month. We know the folks over at that are responsible for that platform ecosystem,
yeah,
and Exact Target is or the historical Exact Target or Salesforce Marketing Cloud would be an area that we would consider, and we just always consider it. Pardot, on the other hand, we won't consider just because their APIs are very they just don't have the mechanisms for us to tie into, whereas Salesforce Marketing Cloud would.
yeah,
But we're just not, building these types of integrations where you're analyzing billions and billions and billions of data points a day, and we're not just like pulling in small little bits and
yeah.
pieces there. It's there's a lot of heavy lifting
It's a
that
scale.
needs to go on, especially when you're talking about people that have lists of millions of people
Yeah.
that they're sending to on a regular basis.
Yeah. That is a very daunting challenge, and I suspect there's an implicit observation there that APIs are not always designed for that sort of wide and broad use. A lot of you can get this one record stuff, but tough
Right.
tough to scale on that one for the way
We've had
you
to
need.
we've had to build around quite a bit of that.
Have
I
you?
liken it to sucking sucking everything through a coffee straw. That's what it really
Yeah,
feels
yeah, exactly. Well. Since we can geek out a little bit because you and I are in control of the conversation here. Technologic 2013, so that gave you an opportunity to probably build on the cloud very early on. Yes.
like. Yes, it did, which definitely helped. We didn't have to. I mean, we've obviously invested millions of dollars in building out the company, and
Mm-hmm.
but that being said, back in 2013, the data infrastructure and data pipelines are completely different today than they were back then,
Yeah.
and we have changed our back end infrastructure multiple times now just
Okay.
to support. You know, I remember when processing, because again, we didn't start in the world of marketing. Processing somebody's inbox of 1,000 emails, or I'm sorry, 100,000 emails, was like unbelievably painful.
Yeah.
And now we're processing billions and billions and billions of events every single day.
Wow.
So as that scale has really
Yeah.
increased,
Yeah.
we've had to make
The
more
adjustments.
technological advances with regards to it.
AWS probably.
Yes, everything is in AWS.
Okay. Okay. And that's there's some great technology in AWS for that kind of work. I was talking with someone else in this space, and they teed up a project using Kinesis, and they were practically singing songs about Kinesis. It's the kind of scale you're talking about. If you were trying to engineer that from like literally from the ground up engine, that'd be a heck of a lift.
Yeah. And we actually were on Kinesis, and then we started moving things away from it because we started reaching scale bottlenecks with it as well. So
Wow. Okay, that right there says something about the scale at which you guys play. How do you get your arms around scale like that, you and your team? I mean, not just building for it, but then managing it, making decisions, and then making change. It's not like you go drag drop copy. We're going to do this over here instead.
right.
And it never
No,
stops either.
yeah, it can become a painful process where you start to see like, hey, this is starting to crack over here, we need to spend a little bit of time before the dam bursts, and causes all kinds of issues.
Yeah.
Luckily, my co-founder and CTO, he is just an absolute brilliant mind when it comes to data architecture, data infrastructure, and he really stays ahead of the game with regards to all of this.
Excellent. Wow, that's a heck of an asset, because it's we're inventing the future almost minute by minute in this space, and the kind of data volumes you're talking about, almost nobody, maybe Sabre was dealing with, Sabre the airline, calculation. Nobody was dealing with that kind of scale, not even that many years ago. It was like limitations of a mainframe in Sabre's case, limitations of relational databases, but now it's opened up, and we're still not keeping up with the fire hose, even close.
Right. Early in my career, I actually started as a software engineer for a company called Celera Genomics, which was where we mapped the human genome, and we had the largest supercomputer in the private world at that time, and we were talking about millions and millions of data points, not billions. And the infrastructure probably cost anywhere from 200 to 300 million in just compute to support that type of
and now to a great extent you want to rent that kind of capability, because it's certainly expensive to buy that kind of capability, and then you really can't make switches. Email's such a long-standing channel and looks so familiar. Who doesn't get in their inbox every day? That trying to acquaint someone with the scale of email in actual use in the world, it's always a little bit hard. When I say 310 billion email messages a day, you can watch the gears grind. And someone said, "Did you say a day?" I said, "Yes, a day." Oh my God, I had no idea. Yeah.
Think about the scale that Google and Microsoft are dealing with from that. And HubSpot is, HubSpot, Marketo. Their scale and their infrastructure is also just continuing to increase.
Is HubSpot their own MTA? Their own send?
So they used to use SendGrid as their main MTA. I believe they have switched everything to themselves now.
Okay. Given what they do, it's not entirely.
And the cost of continuing to use SendGrid, et cetera, would just.
And you've got this funny back and forth shift of, MTAs are only for the big guys, and then they get so big they build their own. Amazon's got SES in their cloud, right? And now, if you want to and you know what you're doing, you can, as a relatively small marketing org, avail yourself of a world-class MTA, if your platform plays nicely with those. And I've even talked to marketers who switch. They'll use this, that, and the other MTA. I don't know if they're just staying ahead of the IP domain police or what. But wow, interesting terrain. Where do you want to take this company?
Just really continue to grow as far as driving value for our customers, in specifically right now in the world of email, but there's lots of different use cases in how you can apply time series analysis and propensity modeling in both the world of sales and marketing, and even outside of that in different aspects of business. In fact, the customer that I was alluding to that was our first customer, they make around 75,000 phone calls every single business day. They have a huge group of inside sales reps. Again, it's a multi-billion-dollar technology company, and we analyze all of their phone data to predict when phones will answer. So their customers, when they're calling them, rather than just a salesperson randomly picking up the phone to call Sarah, they now are informed that Sarah's phone has a higher propensity to answer at this particular time. And we've seen all kinds of long-term great results with that as well. So that's just one example of where propensity modeling can or time series analysis can really help out on the communication side of things.
Well, and the more the more we live with one foot in the real world and one in the digital world, the more data there is for you to, apply the methods and systems to make them work better fundamentally. And I have to say, getting a phone call when I'm more likely to answer the phone is probably better from my perspective as well. It is always a back and forth tension to that. Is it privacy infringement? Is it manipulation? It's a tough question to answer. How is that, jumping topics a little bit, how is the shifting mindset, legal landscape, cultural landscape around privacy, data ownership, even nation by nation differences in privacy? How's that affecting you guys?
So fortunately, it has not had any real negative effect. And the primary reason for that is, like, for Marketo, we pull 0 PII from the Marketo system. We utilize a unique ID that Marketo has, which is called a lead ID. And that's how we profile, is based off of that lead ID's activity.
Lead ID. Okay.
And very similar in the HubSpot ecosystem, they have what's called a VID. We utilize the VID, or virtual ID, as kind of our unique identifier. And then we obviously create our own identifiers. So for us, there's not really PII exchanging hands. That being said, if somebody has a wish to be forgotten or anything along those lines with regards to GDPR, CCPA, we can take it from the VID or the lead ID and then just scrub it from our system. Now, the other advantage that we have is, like, if one of our customers gets questioned about CCPA, like, we can't answer the question. Like, I don't even know how many people reside in California that we have IDs for, because I don't know where they reside. We do nothing with regards to IP addresses or time zones.
Oh, interesting.
Just because, I mean, time zones are riddled with all kinds of issues. And I think that's what's funny about a lot of modern marketing automation systems that say they do send time optimization via time zones. One, you and I could live in the same time zone. You might be an early morning person that tends to engage in your email. I might be a late night person that tends to engage, like truly engage in my inbox. We're all passively dealing with email all day, every day, but we do tend to engage in our inboxes at certain times of day. But with regards to time zones, I may reside in the UK, but my email server lives in California and I VPN into it. Or my infrastructure lives in California. It looks like I live in California. So now, by sending me an email based off of my time zone or IP address, you've effectively sent me emails in the middle of the night.
Oh, yeah. I have to chuckle because the number of times I've wanted to bang my head on the whiteboard behind me dealing with date and time. Like, unless you work with this stuff, you have no idea how stupid it really is fundamentally, how inconsistent and arcane and edge case and nonsensical. I mean, we can't get away from it, but like, when and where is a booger of a question. It's not nearly as simple as you think. Oh, it's like here's where people are aware of it now, or maybe they weren't 2 years ago. Arranging phone calls or video conferences. Now people are much more time zone aware than
they've ever been. Absolutely.
Than they've ever been, right? Because all of a sudden you're literally living and working in different time bands, and it actually really matters. I've had guests on this podcast from New Zealand, from the UK, from Spain, and it's like, wait a minute, how are we gonna
how are we gonna coordinate this?
How and when are we gonna get together without it being an awful experience for at least one of us? So yeah. And
I mean, you think about even places in the United States like Arizona. Arizona has different time zones within the same state. Like, it's funny side story on that. I worked at Microsoft in the 90s. We were a relatively small company when I started there. And I was in PSS, the tech support organization. That's where I started. And I ended up on a committee that was looking to pick the third PSS site for Microsoft, which is like, that's a lot of employees to plunk down somewhere. So we were doing this whole site selection process, and Arizona was almost going to be top dog, and the time zone thing hosed them. Because back then it was all telephone support. And moving time zones and trying to schedule staff it, and
right, it was like, oh man, no flipping way. I don't know if the phone system can even deal with this. So Arizona hobbled themselves without realizing it on that time
Right.
zone thing. Yeah, I was thinking about time zone the other day, and I'm going to use this to dovetail over to talk about privacy and Apple a little bit. We were looking at some data from our newest service that pertains to open rates, and because we did what you had to do is kind of normalize in the data warehouse and say, okay, this is what happened on a 24-hour cycle with this campaign. Like, wait a minute, but middle of the night for who, right? Right? If this guy tends to open his messages at X time of day, your domain of expertise, and like morning people in the UK and morning people here are not doing things at the same time. And do you want to show from the user's point of view that their clock, or is it this global clock that's easier to deal with computationally that we're trying to use to make a picture? I was looking at the tool set that was doing the graph, the data warehouse that was doing that 24-hour normalization. Like, I can't think of a way to make it deal with individuals' time versus a global averaged, GMT based time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, no, quite challenging.
Welcome to my
You've
world,
got
he says.
right, yeah, no, you've got a couple things going on there. One, it's funny just even in the United States talking to marketers and saying, Mike, I don't ever want an email going out. Like if I'm talking to a marketer on the East Coast, I don't ever want an email going out at 3 a.m. And even if their only user base is in the continental United States, my response always is, that's midnight on the West Coast. Do you know how many decision makers are late night kind of individuals
Yeah.
as far as them truly paying attention to their inbox?
Yeah.
That's how you can stand out.
Yeah.
Then I talked to marketers on the West Coast and they said to me, Mike, I would never send an email at 3 a.m. And I say, why? That's 6 a.m. on the East Coast. Do you know how many decision makers have a higher propensity to engage first thing in the morning in their inbox and just because they're in meetings the rest of the day?
Yeah.
So then you expand globally and it becomes an even bigger problem. In addition to that, you have third shift workers, especially in today's day and age. And so the approach we took was we look at relative time as far as kind of like our profiling process. But then we had to build our own entire time zone library because we just couldn't find anything that worked for the end users that use our application so that those two could commingle with one another.
And so that they could make sensible decisions without going
right, exactly. Right. I don't have to make my decisions based off of a global time zone or a relative time zone.
It's you've seen those world time zone clocks that people will have hanging on the wall. What time is it in London? What time is it here? What time is it there? It's like, that's marketing today. You got to keep that thing live in your head because you do probably have a global audience, whether or not you think you do. I mentioned it. I wanted to ask you about it. Has Apple's shenanigans in the world of email and pixels and images affected things for you at all?
So why don't let's take a step back, and I'd love to dive into that. So for anybody that's not aware, I would assume most people are, as far as your audience, like the way open data works is, think of it this way. I install a transparent picture in my email that the human eye can't see. And when you go and open your email, it gets downloaded from a remote server and says, this particular email address, client, etc., opened this email. And that's how an open fires. Well, what Apple has now done is turned it on so that they will cache all of those images for anybody that turns on mail protection privacy. Where we made a strategic decision years and years ago, and we're actually lucky that we made it. It was like a great move on our part, but in hindsight, we weight what we call events differently. And when I talk about events from email, it's, you can have an open, you can have a click. Did that happen on a mobile device? Did that happen on a desktop? How recently did that event occur? We have always kind of washed out mobile opens because mobile opens are really not a good signal. And they never have been. It's a good, think about when you're opening an email on your mobile device, you're probably most likely triaging your inbox. You're not going to fill out forms. You're not going to make purchases. If a brand is lucky, they send it to you and then you're like, oh, wow, I like those shoes, or I like what I saw. And then when I get back to my desktop, I'll take action. Or, hey, I liked what I saw about that webinar, so let me go, register for that webinar. Something caught my attention while I was triaging my inbox on my mobile device. So we've kind of always while we still will take that signal into consideration, we very much deprioritize it.
Yeah. Okay.
That being said, it hasn't been all doom and gloom like everybody said, where your open rates are going to go to 100%, things like that. Like, I have not seen one company that has been so severely impacted by it. Yeah. So that's one. Not to say that can't eventually happen. Two, clicks are clicks are the most valuable signal that we capture.
Yeah.
And clicks on a desktop are obviously more valuable than a click on a mobile device. But back to kind of like where you can still use mobile opens as a directional signal. And what I mean by that is, okay, so maybe your open rate went from 20 to 30% because 10% of your audience has mail protection privacy turned on. Well, if you're doing any kind of testing, like I'm not a big fan of subject line testing because I think it's fool's gold for numerous reasons. But just say I'm doing subject line testing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I split the audiences equally, and an A and a B group. Yeah. Well, it's going to wash itself out directionally, saying, 10% of my iOS 15 users are in the A group and 10% of my iOS users are in the B group. Yeah. So you can still use it as a directional signal, which is what open rates have always been good. That's what they've been good for. They have true engagement. Like, call me crazy, but just because somebody opened an email doesn't mean anything.
Because I've been fairly involved in this, and I'll delve into why in a little bit, but time permitting. But it was on one webinar conversation, and we were batting some of this back and forth early on when we were all guessing hard about what the impact of Apple's change in image handling would actually be. And someone said, well, here's the thing to keep in mind. We tend to think in terms of commerce-based marketing, and probably even more e-commerce based. I'm sending the list, I want them to do X, I want them to purchase or click or join or something like that. There's a bunch of kinds of businesses where the content in the message is actually the point. Newsletter, easy example. Publisher, easy examples. Like, they don't want me to click through. They don't care if I click through. That's not what they do. What they do is like I've got newsletters I pay for and I read them every morning, and that's what they want me to do with it. They have lost some of the signal, which was always at best statistical and always at best, as you said, an indicator. They've lost some of their signal there, but one, it was an accident. It was there in the first place. Like, wasn't designed for that. It was an accident. Like, HTML happened to include an image tag. Image tags happen to be HTTP protocol. HTTP protocol has a whole big damn payload that you can look at. Wow, that was a nice accident that we exploited for 20 years, and now it's getting it's getting handled differently. Okay, fine, adapt. And my somewhat maybe self-interested comment as a real-time content provider early on, I said to the email marketing guys in a Zoom conference that if you guys had actually made more interesting use of HTML for 20 years, we wouldn't actually have this problem. The fact that pixels are about the only thing you do with HTTP, well, geez, no wonder everyone's irked, because really the pixel's good for you and it doesn't do anything for the recipient of the message at all. Maybe a little bit of feedback so you can give them better messages, or that's the rationale we'll throw out. But truthfully, they don't see any difference. There was a Washington Post article about this today, And my wife sent it to me, and I'm like, yeah, 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 I know. But what the reporter focused on was pixels. I'm like, oh, it's not the only kind of image you could send, but boy, it's the one we're going to talk about all the time, and justifiably so, right? And I don't
Yeah,
disagree with this
that
premise.
that's a very interesting point, because I always think about the why. Like, why are
Oh,
people so concerned about this?
yeah.
And it all comes down to marketing's kind of like obsession with attribution. Uh,
Yes.
I mean, that's
Yes.
what a lot of these problems stem
Yes.
from,
Yes.
is true attribution, taking credit. Like, I, just because I don't open your email
Yeah.
does not mean I'm like, it sends a subliminal message to me. And it potentially sends a subliminal message. That's why, you see a lot of marketers send email for the sake of sending. I sent an email today, or like I sent an email yesterday, and they, kind of, we'll probably can go in 20 different tangents here, but like, one of the challenges in today's world of email marketing is companies have invested millions and millions and millions of dollars into social advertising. And what's the goal of social advertising? It's one, brand impressions, but two, it's so that you can collect people's email addresses, because you rent the house, you treat the house that you rent, which is Google, Facebook, all the FANG stocks, you rent that house and you treat it better than the house that you actually own, which is your core intellectual property, which is your email list. Yeah. And then you tend to really treat it as a commodity, because executives believe there's no cost to sending email. Well, the real cost comes in on the attention of your recipients.
Yes.
And once you have lost that attention, because at the end of the day, we live in an attention economy. There's a reason why Netflix and Hulu are spending, billions of dollars building artificial intelligence to understand what movie are you going to like next, because they know if they serve you up that movie that you are more likely to have a propensity to engage with.
Yep.
Then you're not going to churn as a subscriber.
Yep.
Where instead of continuing to, and again, everybody's databases are very bloated. And rather than saying, hey, let's take some money from over here and put it into the house that we actually own versus just trashing the house that we own.
Yeah.
The world would probably be a bit like, the world of digital marketing would be a better place.
Yeah. Yeah. Here, and cheers for everything that you just said. Marketers, and don't mean to speak ill of my brethren, but I don't think of myself as a marketer. They're kind of needy. Like any email address they get their mitts on, they're like, hang on to this. Like, hang on a second. It's actually not yours. It's theirs. Right.
Right.
They said, okay, I want to hear from you for now, but it's not, it's not your address. It's their address. One. And then two, what you touched on it, like they'll send for the sake of sending because it looks close to free. Imagine how differently email marketers would behave if the cost, ratcheted up where they had to pay attention to it. Like,
well, I think I actually think that is exactly what every company is dealing with today. There is, other than the cost of storing and paying for HubSpot, Marketo, Salesforce, whatever it might be, there is actually a real cost now. And the real cost is deliverability. Google, Microsoft, and corporate filtering systems are literally waging a war on spam. And I'm not talking about your professional spammers that are trying to steal your credit card information, but rather marketers that send lots and lots of email that people aren't paying attention to. And that starts just like you have a credit score in your personal life that determines, is a bank going to loan you money? How much are they going to loan you? Under what conditions are they going to loan you? You also have a domain score, domain reputation, which says, hey, you've just completely hosed yourself or trashed yourself. I'm no longer putting you in the inbox. And that's what Google, Microsoft, and corporate filtering systems are doing today. And that's why you see marketers scrambling, trying to say, well, email no longer works. Well, no. Email still does work. If you do it well.
If you do it, well put in. You're absolutely right, boy. We're we're very much on the same wavelength here. And it's interesting. This is a big jump, but it's probably worth talking about. Who elected them, God?
Sorry, say that again.
Who elected Google, Microsoft at all to do that job, and under what sort of purview, supervision, like. And I'll pick on Google, much as I admire the company and use the heck out of their technology. Like, we're going to have a promotions tab. Okie dokie. Like, fine. And it's like saying we're going to put mail privacy protection in place. Everyone's going to say it's a good idea because of how you pitched the idea in a word or two. Works fine. Well, now marketers, as you pointed out, have this. Deliverability is the SEO of email, right? It's this
Yep.
bizarre black box world that constantly changes. There's no predictability. You can't go to the rule of law and say we all play by the same set of rules here. Like, literally, big company X is setting rules and changing the rules, and everyone's just got to go, oh crap, I guess we just have to pay. Your point, to keep up with that. And it does kind of irk me that, and it's a natural evolution, natural maturation of the channel, if you will, that, de facto monopolies emerge or de facto duopolies emerge, and they can exert this kind of control because they can, right? Apple
Yep.
arguably broke a whole bunch of internet agreements when they shipped iOS 15 in September. One of the agreements was HTTP has the following headers that'll define how the content behaves. They ignore those in MPP.
Yep.
They're like, yeah, we're not going to pay attention to that, right? Because we don't have to.
Well, you said something that I like one at the beginning, which I disagree with. I think Google is an evil, evil company.
Yeah.
We use them internally because it becomes
Yep.
it has to. But with regards to like free email addresses, I mean, at the end of the day, you're the product.
Yeah.
And so that's what people have to recognize is that you are truly the product.
Yeah.
And now corporate filtering systems are a different thing because let's focus on Google and Microsoft here. We'll pick on them for a minute, or Yahoo or whatever it might be. And I'm no fan of Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft is doing a better job of doing no evil. Google just continues to do evil for the sake of Google making more money. But with regards to why they've done things like promotions tabs and smarter spam systems and all of that is because they use that as a bit of their differentiator, because there is an all-out war between, who's going to own that data. Is it going to be Microsoft? Is it going to be Google?
Yeah.
And those free email addresses? Because for anybody that doesn't think that Google is reading your personal email to build a deeper profile on you as an individual, I mean, you're smoking crack. The same thing with Microsoft, any kind of those free email addresses. Now, on the business side, when you actually pay for that, there's strict privacy laws, things like that. But let's face it, Amazon had their whole marketplace where they had a whole ton of engineers reading their customers' purchases, things like that, so that Amazon could start, outstripping their, even the people that are on their marketplace.
Yep.
Google, and effectively what's happened is these organizations have become utilities, and we need to treat them as such. That's kind of a whole nother discussion. But with regards to corporate filtering systems, I also understand that side of the house. One, you have to keep out phishing attacks, which are continuously becoming harder and harder for an organization to ascertain or even understand. So that's one. Two, if I'm the CEO of a corporation, why do I want my employees reading marketing emails all day? So their IT organizations are saying, well, we have to keep out phishing attempts. So that's one. Two, we don't want our employees spending all day on webinars, and because then they'll just not, or reading email, because then they'll never get anything done. I mean, we're all getting hundreds of emails a day, whether it's in our personal lives, professional lives, et cetera. So these corporate filtering systems, that's why they put in rate limiting systems. And the modern day spam systems are the rate limiting systems, whether it be Barracuda, SourceFire, there's a whole plethora of them that are out there.
Yeah. Wow. Good observation. And a very real tension. Let me feed that one back to you and see what you make of this. You could easily make the same argument about the web browser on a corporate desktop.
100%.
Yeah, yeah. It's like,
And I'm not saying that I agree with it, but
yeah,
there are certainly organizations that block ESPN and
yeah,
Washington Post and
yeah,
CNN and
yeah,
Fox
yeah,
News
yeah,
and all of that because they don't want their employees spending time on it. Now, I think if you're working for a corporation like that today, I mean, that should
we
be
have a
kind of a
different
huge
problem.
red, right? That would be a huge red flag. But you even saw during, the height of the pandemic, a lot of organizations started putting spyware on their employees'
Yeah,
laptops and desktops to understand how much, are they spending in different apps and how much time are they spending in meetings and calling people out on that. So, there's Big Brother is not going away, I guess is the long and short of it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we'll find guerrilla ways of fighting back, but how effectively. I read the other day that one of the hot sellers on Amazon, since you used the word, during the pandemic was a device that would make your mouse move while you weren't at your desk because
Because of that.
right? Because of the whole tracking things. Like, oh no, I'm working,
Right.
right? See, the mouse was moving. Like,
Right.
wow, if the output is clicks, we have a very different definition of meaningful, contribution as an employee.
Right.
that,
Right.
that in itself may be the root problem. Yeah, it's funny. I philosophically think what Apple decided to do with MPP. It's like it's fine by me. In fact, it's great by me. Sign me up. In terms of do I want to have some control over whether or not someone knows that I opened this email? Sure, sounds fine to me, and I'm not sympathetic to their plight as a marketer with slightly skewed metrics. Like,
Yes.
that's not necessarily so not my problem, right? Like, I don't really care. But it's a pretty blunt weapon. And
Absolutely. And the fact that Apple, I agree with you. I mean, when I first read the news, I mean, we'll come back to Amazon in a minute, but when I first read the news about MPP, I was very frustrated
yeah,
because while Apple still says they give you choice,
hmm,
when you're going through and setting up, it's more or less, if you do this, your iPhone's going to, if you don't do this, your iPhone's going to explode.
yeah,
And in fact, I actually like it, if the market were better educated. Good marketers use open signals in ways that actually help the consumer, such as,
yes,
I am fatigued of your emails. I don't need an email from Nordstrom every freaking day.
yeah,
And if they would just recognize that, if you and I were having a conversation, you started, Matthew, if you started looking around while we're on this podcast and
yeah,
playing on your phone, I'm
yeah,
not going to keep going with the same conversation.
yeah, yeah,
Well, open data can be used in a very similar way where it's digital body language, which is,
yeah,
this person is not really engaging with me. Let me slow the cadence or volume of email
right,
that I'm sending to them,
right,
which has benefits for the consumer, benefits for me as a domain reputation, et cetera. So to me, it was very frustrating that Apple took this light because they made the decision to take this away from me.
yeah.
Sure, I can turn it off, just like I can turn off promotions in my Gmail,
But you
etc.
won't.
But you just, not many people know how to do it. Your general consumer probably doesn't know how to go. They don't fumble around in their settings. They just do what they do. But remember, this is the one kind of positive note. I think email marketers tend to freak out quite often about news. And what I mean by that is, if you think a couple months ago, everybody was freaking out about MPP destroying everything. Email marketing was never going to work.
Yeah,
And again, sure, open data can still be used directionally until you have 100% open rates. And guess what? We're all going to open email on our phone, but then we come back and open the same email on our desktop.
Yep.
That doesn't go away unless eventually Apple's going to impose this on their native Mac or native mail client on the Mac. But I think
Market
people
share
will
for
find
that.
that frustrating because now every time, just like Outlook, when I have to go click download images,
Yeah.
which is the default, whereas Google doesn't have that turned on by default, it just becomes too much clicky.
Yeah.
But just like the sky was falling a couple of months ago, I don't think we've seen the sky falling. But if you also remember a couple of years ago, and this is what I try to remind people of, remember when Alexa was going to destroy email marketing because Alexa was going to read all of our emails?
Oh, wow.
And Alexa was going to read our email inbox to us.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, open rates are done, click rates are done, like delivery is done, because we're all going to be sitting in our kitchen and Alexa's going to say, you've got an email and it's from Jeff. And it says, hey, can you pick up the dog? And can you pick up the kids from school today?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Like, sure, it's a kind of I guess a thing, but it certainly hasn't ruined the world of email marketing.
It certainly has not, and it's hard to imagine anything more annoying. Having my email
Right.
to be like, oh.
I mean, it would be all day, every day that you got something just talking to you. That, I mean, that's how much email we're all getting.
Right.
It's,
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a basic math issue about speed of audible conversation, speed of scanning, not reading. Like,
Right.
Sorry. Yeah. It's like, yeah, that's not going to work. You're right. There is a bit of a propensity to freak out there. And back to root cause, root solution. You said it a little while ago, right on the mark. If you do this well, these things are not obstacles and problems, right?
Right.
There are emails that I get very regularly that I read when I get them. Why? Because what's in them is uniformly, pleasurable, interesting, informative, something, right? There's value there for me. So, so I open them. And there's others. I always end up picking on these guys. One of these days I'll fess up who they are, but there's a pretty good sized outdoor retailer who shall remain nameless. I've been on their email list for 12 years. I've bought thousands of dollars worth of gear from them, and they still don't know who the hell I am. I still get the same drivel about categories that I'm never going to buy in when they've got huge signals about the things that I really am likely to buy in. I'm like, would you do this better, please? Because you'd get in my wallet. I guarantee you'd get in my wallet if you just bothered. And I know you've got the data because it was your cash register, guys. Like, what the heck?
Yep.
And I know it's hard, it's complex, and there's too much data, and you can't correlate. Yeah, right. I don't care.
No, that all can exist, and I think you have a enabling piece of technology on that front, which is kind of real time. Hey, this individual is going to get this individual is going to get that. We have done some language modeling, like this person tends to like emails with webinars. I mean, we're not there yet. It's kind of like been a skunk works longer term kind of view out. This person likes webinars. This person likes white papers, they're more interactive with those types of things. But like you said, like outdoor, the other component is, again, is when people start to ignore your brand, that can have some, I don't need an email from, call it Patagonia or REI every day. I would much rather have an email from them once a month. And if they recognize that, if they sent me an email once a month, I would say, because day to day, the product isn't going to change.
Yeah.
If they sent me an email once a month, wow, let me go see what they have to say. Let me go see what is new in the store.
Let's pick on email marketers again because it's so much fun. Rarely do I get a message with a little dial at the bottom says, how often do you want to hear from us? Right? I may get a preference center that looks like the space shuttle dashboard, and I can't figure out. All they really want me to do is to not say no, go away, leave me alone. But that it'd be relatively easy to give me a scale choice of like, how often do you want to hear from us? Oh, well, click that one. Fine, good, we're done. Litmus, company in the email space, for those of you listening, Litmus sent an email about a month ago that said, do you want to keep hearing from us? And I do, but I was like, salud, guys, way to go. That was a brassy decision to go ahead and say, look, we're not going to keep sending to you if you won't even click this little button, right? Why? Because we're going to honor the signal of disinterest that we're getting, because we can't necessarily measure as well anymore or as clearly anymore whether there's any interest at all, because that feedback loop is weaker than it was.
Yeah. And the good thing is we are shifting in a world of just mountains of information and mountains of data, where a lot, rather than having a preferences center, or rather than having, putting the onus on you to say, do you want to still hear from us?
Yeah.
You can utilize those signals to automatically adjust.
Yeah. We start figuring it out. The kind of thing that, we've touched on them, like big companies have applied their horsepower to do. I bet Amazon is a pretty darn good idea. What I do and don't, what I look at, what I read, etc. They've got enough years of history, that's for sure.
And one of the things that I always try to remind marketers about, and even like executives as well, is if you are lucky, 5% of your total addressable market is in the market for what you do or what one of your competitors does.
Yeah.
If you are absolutely lucky, it is between, maybe at the max, especially in e-commerce, 10%.
Yeah.
For most B2B organizations, it is half that. It's 2 to 3%. So would you rather try and keep those 2 and 3% interested, but also treat the other 97% with respect, so that when they are in the market 6, 9, 12, 18, 24, 36 months from now, that they have a good impression of your brand? You haven't broken that kind of social contract with the fact that they gave you their email address.
Because that negative impression takes a long time to wear
Absolutely
off, if it ever in fact does. Well, dang, man, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Awesome. Well, definitely have enjoyed it.
I love what you brought to it and what you guys do. If someone's listening, and they say, "Wow, this is interesting. I want to learn more about the company," and we're on HubSpot, what kind of guidance is? This is the kind of marketer or business that 7th Sense can help, because it's not everybody.
But we can help. Like we could. I shouldn't say we can. We could help everybody using HubSpot and Marketo. Well, HubSpot has different tiers and there's API access, all that. But we could potentially help organizations. And one of the ways people come to us is like, "Well, my email list is small," and I'm like, "Well, that probably means your email list is really important. Those people on the email list." Whereas they're like, "Oh, well, your system can't really or couldn't really help us." The email list doesn't. This list size does not matter.
Okay.
What really matters is, do you have a definitive way to say ROI, that you capture ROI from email? Meaning, is email is it a channel that truly drives results for you? Or do you fall in the camp of, I send email to send email? And what we tend to find is, when companies, we realize this, a lot of companies tend to send email to send email. Then they get themselves into deliverability issues, meaning they're no longer inboxing. And then they come to us and they want a silver bullet. And we say, there's no silver bullet that exists for this, but we do provide you with tools that allow you to dig out of it. And those tend not to be the greatest of customers of ours, because they're the ones always looking for a silver bullet, versus, hey, just like every company wants to do SEO, very rarely, I shouldn't say very rarely, a lot of companies don't want to invest the time or energy that it takes to really drive a true SEO program. That's very much similar with email. Unless you are looking to truly invest in your email program, then we can help you, but it's not going to be a huge win.
It's not the sweet. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Now it's sometimes knowing who's not a fit.
Yep. That's a harder problem than knowing who is a fit. Right. I totally agree.
Yeah, it is. Well, listen, Mike, thank you so much for spending we've gone a whole hour talking in depth like this.
Cool. Yeah. No. Thank you again for reaching out, and this has been an absolute blast. Would love to stay in touch, and thanks for anybody who listened as well.
We'll do that. My guest has been Mike Donnelly, CEO of The Seventh Sense. You can find them on the web at the7thsense.com. Correct?
That is correct.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.